From Acres USA, you are listening to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we'll explore sustainable farming, regenerative practices, and the latest innovations in eco-agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast.
Well, welcome. It's rare to find a physician, a doctor who knows anything about food and farming. And it's rare to find an agronomist who understands what their production does in people's bodies. We have a special treat for us today because we have one person who's both of those things. Arden Andersen consults with some of the largest farming operations around the world. He's the author of the book Science in Agriculture and hundreds of articles on health, nutrition, medicine, and agronomy. Please welcome Arden Andersen.
Thank you, Fred. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you've had a great time at the conference. We're kind of winding down a little bit. And certainly I'm sure some of you are just kind of spinning a little bit, and take a number of books home, tapes, and all kinds of other things, and kind of wonder, well, gee, what did I really get out of this whole thing? So what I wanted to go through today, yesterday it was more of an ag talk, today it's going to be more of a medical talk. And the theme, of course, is human health, which is really the ultimate indicator of farm management, because ultimately that's what agriculture is all about. And even though a lot of people might want to say that, well, farming is about producing commodities or ethanol or something of that nature, ultimately the bottom line is still it's all about human health. And we could even link the ethanol issue and cotton and wool and those kinds of things back into that. But ultimately the bottom line is that really it's all about human health. And so that really is our indicator here. So who is this doctor standing up here? Well, I am a family practice doc. I'm at Goshen, Indiana, Crossroads Healing Arts. I'm the medical director there. I was there for a number of reasons, a number of years, then went back to school a couple of years ago, got a master's degree in public health. And the reason that I did that, a number of people asked me, why in the world would you do that? Glutton for punishment, maybe. But the reality is that from an efficiency and effectiveness perspective, the more people I can talk to about what is going on here, about this subject, the more people we have making changes, the more we change the consumer. And really it's consumer demand that changes agriculture, because that's where the money is. And the thing about it is yes, I can stand in here and we can talk to several hundred people, and I love doing that, and that's great. But I can't be in 10 different places doing this at the same time. So there's a little ego thing in medicine, and that is you got to have a bunch of credentials. So with a public health degree, I have, again, some more credentials that I can talk to doctors. And by being able to talk to doctors, for every one doctor that I can talk to about health and nutrition correlated to agriculture, about genetically engineered foods and the dangers of those, pesticides, all of those kinds of things, basically I'm talking to 1,000 to 2,000 patients, consumers. So next year, one conference I'll be to, there'll probably be about 100, 150 doctors there. So, I'm looking at 150,000 to 300,000 patients in one conference that I'm going to be able to potentially affect. And so that's where we really can then start changing, as I said, agriculture, because the consumer votes every day with their dollar at the grocery store, at the farmer's market, at the health food store, whatever it might be. That really is the most important vote. So that was the main reason that I did that. And so I am residency trained in occupational, environmental, and preventive medicine, and I am board certified in public health. I am a flight surgeon also in the Air Force, in the Air Force Reserves. And the reason I do that is because, well, originally was because I get to do some cool things that I would never get to do as a civilian. And so, boys and their toys type of thing. And as well, originally I was an agriculture teacher and consultant. So the farm came first and agriculture background came first. So Dr. Jeffrey Life, who I have met, is a very interesting gentleman. He's 73 years old. He exercises 5 days a week, still has a full-time practice. And if you've ever seen pictures of Arnold Schwarzenegger when Arnold was in pretty good shape, he's pretty muscular and whatever, well, this is what Dr. Jeffrey Life looks like at age 73. So we are all going to age, but we don't have to get old. Most people think that aging automatically means you're getting old. And some people do right between the ears. And so the older you get between the ears, the faster you get between the top of your head and the bottom of your feet. So very importantly, we absolutely have to address what's going on between the ears, because what you think absolutely affects what you put in your mouth. How many of you accidentally ate lunch today? No? Oh, come on. A lot of people would like to believe that, gee, Doc, I just can't change my diet. It just happens by accident. I walk by the cookie dish here, or I walk by the stand at the grocery store or whatever, and those things just accidentally fall into the shopping cart. No, it doesn't happen. So, an interesting organization called Cenogenics, whom I have been trained with, is looking at what we call age management medicine. What is age management medicine? Well, that's about aging healthfully, not getting old. So at whatever age you're at, you're able to do whatever it is you want to do. And of course, part of that starts between the ears, because if you don't change what's between the ears, you won't change anything else anyway. It doesn't matter. You won't change your diet. You won't change your exercise program. You won't change anything that you do. So what happens here is, as we get older, starting out at birth, our quality of life kind of increases, but then it seems to peak. And then as we get older and older and older, it seems to get down to nothing. But that's part of the mentality that most people have relative to life. And what we want to do is improve that, so that really that quality of life, that peak quality of life that we get to, we can maintain that up until the day we die. Now, I know a lot of people are real concerned that, oh my goodness, we're here at Armageddon. We're near the end of times. Trust me, every day the world ends for someone. And every day the world begins for someone else. So I really don't buy into, oh my goodness, it's the end of days. Because I've had a few friends pass on in the past year or so. So for them, the world has already ended. And as well, I've had a number of young couples come into my practice in the past several months with new babies. So for them, the world has just begun. And I think that's really where we need to be, is thinking about that, remembering every day ends and begins. So health is really a choice. It is a choice. It doesn't matter what kind of economy you're built into, you're living in, you're born into, you decide to work into or leave, it's still a choice. You say, oh no, I didn't have any choice. Yes, you did. You always have a choice. You always have a choice. Now, you may not like the choices that you have, but you always do have a choice. You can do nothing. That is a choice. Everyone chooses their lifestyle. They choose what they eat daily. They choose their daily activities. They make a daily choice of their health or something else. Everyone chooses daily how much water they're going to drink. Oh, Doc, I just can't seem to drink that much water. Well, that's a choice. It would be better if you drank more. We may inherit genetic potential, but we do not inherit genetic certainty. So the genetic potential that our parents gave us, yes, that kind of set the stage. But what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do with that genetic potential? So health stands above the crowd. Some people are scared to death, literally scared to death, to stand out. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, and that's in Proverbs. So the Bible talked about this as well. Health and sickness are all about what's between the ears. It's a choice. It is a choice. And more importantly, it's a choice of what do we do about it and what do we do with it. So we have a number of people that may have susceptibilities to diabetes or heart disease or autoimmune disorders, dementia, whatever it might be. We have maybe susceptibilities to that because of generations of diet and lifestyle. But the thing about it is what are you going to do with it today? With whatever you're born with, whatever you may have encountered by some exposure, what are you going to do with it and what are you going to do about it? And unfortunately, I see a lot of people that just give up. And of course, there's a lot of mentality around today about, well, everybody else is responsible. So nobody wants to take personal responsibility for where they're at. Oh, it's somebody else. Doctor, you must fix me. Or government, you must fix me. Or mama or daddy, you must fix me. And the thing about it is that what's broken is what's between the ears. And once that gets working, then other things will happen. So eating is no accident. The sloth and gluttony are the underlying cause of illness. High glycemic diet is the key to visceral fat, which is the driver to inflammation and chronic disease. Now, yesterday I kind of briefly touched on that, kind of getting a little introduction, but today we'll go a little further into that. And visceral fat is the fat not around your belly, not on your hips, ladies. What it is, it's fat around the liver, around the spleen, around the pancreas. It's fat around your internal organs. And you can't see that because you could be a fairly thin person and think, wow, that person is in pretty good shape. And yet when we do a scan on them, we find out that they've got a significant amount of visceral fat. Visceral fat is inflammatory. And inflammation is the seed to all diseases. Now, there may be 2 to 3% of diseases that are truly genetic. But of course, then why are they truly genetic? What's happened in previous generations to bring that about? But the thing about it is, inflammation is the underlying key. And inflammation is driven by what you put in your mouth. And that is a choice. It's sad how many Christian churches and ministers regularly promote and practice sloth and gluttony. It's amazing to me. How many church gatherings do you go to, and what do they have? They're full of white sugar, white flour, and junk. Things that absolutely increase inflammation, they increase diabetes, they increase cardiovascular disease, they increase attention deficit hyperactivity in children. Oh, but that's God's will. No, it isn't. It's man's will. It's man's choice. Name one food that God processed for us and removed all the nutrition. One food. Not one food did God process for us. So when we put that stuff in our mouth, it's our choice. We're going to have consequences to that. We're going to have consequences to that. So there's states of life. I find there's 3 states of life. There's health, there's pre-disease, and there's disease. Now, health is a proactive process. It's a proactive process. It doesn't happen by accident. It's a proactive process. Pre-disease, basically you're waiting in fear for the next fate, doing little to improve your health. In other words, the next fate. Pre-disease means that you're petrified to death, that I've got to be careful walking around that corner because some little critter's going to jump on me and I'm going to get sick. That's pre-disease. Disease, basically, you're drowning in fear, anger, and you're full-blown war with nature, which nature ultimately always wins. And so then you're blaming God or God's will for this happening to you. But God isn't the one who processed the foods that you put in your mouth. So the states of life, health is a state of living to the fullest physical, mental, and emotional capability of the life God has bestowed upon us. Now, granted, that's different for each one of us, perhaps. It is an assertive process involving experiencing the richness, the love, and the bliss life has to offer. Pre-disease, on the other hand, is a state of declining living with one ear and eye on alert, looking for, anticipating, and fearful of the next calamity, pathogen, accident, misfortune, or some disease to jump out from around the corner and pounce upon thee. Just getting older. That's what we hear. Doctors will tell you that, or people say that as well. Oh, well, you know, you're not 25 anymore. Oh, we're just getting older. Go to the doctor, you know, you've got this ache or that pain. Well, you know, you're just getting older. That's just part of aging. And it's amazing how many patients will come to me and tell me that. Well, you know, I have this or that going on, but, you know, I'm just getting older. It's just part of aging. Mm-hmm. Yep, well, I'm not 25 anymore. And the state of dying. Disease is a state of declining living, struggling against the forces of recycling of the flesh. Engulfed by warring fears and frantic gasps for postponement of natural law, hoping that divine intervention will erase one's violation of the basic principles of cause and effect, of nutrition, immunity, and most importantly, survival of the fittest. Oh, please, God, wipe out all of these things that I have created for myself. And sometimes He does. Sometimes He does exactly that. But a lot of times He kind of gives us little nudges. You know, may put a Band-Aid on it and kind of kick us in the butt a little bit and says, here, get busy. Take care of yourself, type of thing. Disease is the consequence of an overt violation of natural law of life. It is the result of snubbing the rule of law. It is the ultimate expression of debt living. Thinking that healthy bodies need not contain full and balanced nutrition. Now that is very much the standard medical approach to medicine. Because there's absolutely no concept that you need to supply the body with nutrition in order to maintain health. Oh, it really doesn't matter what you put in there. You can eat McDonald's every day. You can do whatever you want to do because, it's just going to happen. If you've got the fat gene, or if you've got the cardiovascular gene, or if you've got the cancer gene, why, it doesn't matter what you do. It's just going to happen. It's just the luck of the draw. You know what luck is? Luck is where preparation and opportunity meet. So you notice how some people always seem to be lucky? Yeah, it's where a lot of hard work went into the preparation. So now, when the teacher appears, you're ready. That's really what luck is all about. So the killing of disease organisms is merely a stalling tactic, delaying the physical recycling of the body. That's really all it is. So if we plan for disease, which really we consume the typical American diet, because the medical system says you might as well just plan for it because it's going to happen. It doesn't matter what you put in your mouth because it's all the same anyway. Just plan for disease. And we're kind of set up that way from the beginning. Children are told that from as old as they can hear anything. So, of course, that's what they're programmed with, so that's what they believe. We follow the food pyramid and the American Diabetic Association diet. Guaranteed, if you follow those diets, you will have the diseases that they talk about. The best way to guarantee that you will remain a diabetic is to follow the American Diabetic Association diet. Yep. Pretty amazing, really. Consume copious amounts of diet soda. It's an oxymoron. Diet soda. All you have to do is take the T off from it, and you really find out what it's all about. But a lot of people think, they're overweight, and so I'll have the Diet Coke, please. If they knew anything about biochemistry, what they would know is that the diet actually increases your craving for sweets. Increases your craving for sweets. So as well, consume regular rations of processed fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Now, name one processed fat, protein, or carbohydrate that God gave us. Name one. Don't tell me this is God's will. Sit on your butt and complain you cannot exercise, you're too tired, you have no time, your joints hurt too much. Why do you think they do? It's because of the things that go in the mouth. So, yes, some people have more challenges than others, without question. Every individual is going to have their own challenges. And what we have to find is what's going to be appropriate for you as an individual to take the next step. Some of you may be athletic inclined, so we can be maybe a little more assertive with you, a little more aggressive. Where another person, they've never been in athletics, they really haven't ever done much of anything but work hard. So we're going to have to take them a little bit slower. But the thing about it is that the best way to stop feeling sorry for yourself is to get active. Because you start releasing endorphins into the system, which are the feel-good hormones. So, man, not God, created white bread, white sugar, white rice, white flour, artificial sweetener, soda pop, processed junk, grain diets for ruminants, estrogenic growth hormone for beef cattle, recombinant BGH for dairy cattle, food irradiation, atrazine, endosulfan, glyphosate, genetically manipulated and infected crops, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So it wasn't God that created or invented the food pyramid that tells you should eat all this junk. So, yes, we all have challenges, and certainly in an agricultural system, we use a lot of those pesticides and so on. I've been exposed to atrazine. We do the best that we know at that point in time. But the thing about it is now you know. So once you know, it's now up to you to start making the change. And for many times, in many situations, in agriculture in particular, we're not saying that you necessarily have to dump all the pesticides in 15 minutes. It may take 5 or 10 years before we are able to get to the point where our soils are in good enough shape, our crops are in good enough shape, our genetics are strong enough that we don't need the pesticides in order to grow the farm like we want to grow the farm. And I know there's some organic people out there going to say, well, we're doing organics right now and we're having just a good time. And that's true. There are some organic farmers out there that are getting equal or greater the yields and quality than what the conventional system is. My hat is off to you. There are people who are doing that, without question. But the problem is that there's also a lot of people out there with an organic label on them, and the only reason they have organic labels on them is because they couldn't make it otherwise. And so they think that by going organic and being organic by neglect, now we can survive on the farm side of the equation. But what you hear a lot of times is, it costs more money to produce this way. No, it doesn't. If it is costing you more to produce that way, you haven't figured it out yet. And so I know that steps on a few toes. So, bottom line is we've got to get results. If we're going to look at this system from a global perspective as far as feeding the world real food, then we have to understand we have limited resources on this planet. And so you have to learn how to do it to maximize efficiency, which means you maximize output per unit of input. So I'm not saying you have to have the greatest yield, but you do have to have the greatest yield per unit of input. Some people say, well, I don't apply anything out there. Yeah, right, and your crop shows it too. We have to have the greatest amount of density. In other words, highest bricks, highest nutrient density per unit of input. That's what we have to have in order for us to be healthy. Otherwise, we're going to stay at pre-disease or disease. So we have to move through that system as far as understanding what does it take to get to that point so that we are greater at efficiently and effectively producing food so that consumers don't have to consume the quantity of material to feel satisfied. The reason we have so much obesity is because we consume hollow calories. We consume calories that don't have any nutrition to them. Yeah, they have a lot of carbohydrate and energy to them, but no minerals to speak of, very little vitamins to speak of. And so the efficiency is terrible. We have to consume this huge quantity of them, and still we don't get satiation. In other words, we don't feel satisfied. We still are looking for something to eat, even though we just consumed a bucket full of stuff. We're still hungry because the body's saying, hey, I need more mineral. I need more mineral. So it's choice. None of these things we need, those things that I just listed. We have chosen to use them. We have technologies to grow greater yields with less fertilizer and no pesticides. We do have that technology. Yes, it takes some work to get to that point, and it really takes that work between the ears. It takes more mental energy to do that. Absolutely. You got to think. You got to be on your toes. And a lot of people don't want to have to do that. But for those who are going to be successful in the future, that's where it's at. It takes more brain work. We do have as well the technology to produce food with excellent bricks, nutrient density, and the freedom from pathogens. The interesting thing as well that most people really don't understand and don't want to talk about is that as we increase the bricks rating on the food, which means we increase the nutrient density on the food, it doesn't matter what it's exposed to within limits because it doesn't pick it up. It doesn't pick it up. You hear about these things about food contamination, which really gets people nervous about things. And what we find is that the lower the quality of the food, in other words, the lower the nutrient density of the food, it doesn't matter whether you grow it organically or otherwise, it's still loaded with junk. There was a study done a number of years ago looking at comparing pesticide levels in organic foods versus conventional foods. And as many people would expect, the organic food had much lower level of pesticide residue than did the conventional food, until you looked at old pesticides. If you looked at modern, currently used pesticides, that was the result. But then they went in and they looked at old pesticides that have been banned for quite some time, such as DDT. The organics had just as much residue as did the conventionals. So the issue here is not pesticide level. The issue is nutrient density. As we get the nutrient density up, those systems don't pick up those chemicals. Those things get broken down. As well, we have already obtained the genetics that outperform any variety that is or might be genetically engineered. We already have it. We don't need genetic engineering to solve any of our health problems, any of our production problems, any of our environmental problems. We already have the genetics necessary to do all that. But what we have to do is put them to work, which means we have to take and feed those genetics. That doesn't mean that we don't still need some plant breeding and so on to improve characteristics, but we do that through appropriate nutrient selection. Pre-disease, one's body is already deficient in health and nutrition, as it is susceptible to disease. It is just waiting for disease to occur and the full force of recycling to take effect. Most society is at this state of existence, or at least most people consuming the typical American diet. You're at pre-disease. Isn't it amazing? The whole thing about medicine today and a lot of discussions is people are just waiting until maybe they find breast cancer, maybe they find colon cancer, maybe they find heart disease, maybe they find some other problem. In fact, that's a lot of the discussions. Well, just waiting until you have a heart attack. Isn't it amazing how many people do nothing until they have a heart attack? It's really amazing to me. Then all of a sudden they have a heart attack, and wow, you now see them out walking. You see them exercising a little bit. You now see them eating less McDonald's instead of McDonald's every day. Maybe it's only once a week now. It's amazing how that changes. Why didn't you prevent it to begin with? But no, they wait until they have a pre-disease scare. The principles is just as appropriate before you collapse of that heart attack as it is afterwards. It's really the fool's game. Other than breast cancer, it's amazing to me how many times I've heard this, that I will get a consult from a specialist to me about one of my patients. Other than breast cancer, Mrs. Jones is in perfect health, states the physician dictating her visit with the patient. Wow, that's kind of an oxymoron, really, because disease and health cannot exist in the same place. And so, at the same time, or any more than light and darkness can exist in the same place. So, the bottom line is that if she were truly in perfect health, she wouldn't have breast cancer. So she was at pre-disease. You're just waiting for other things to show up. It's amazing to me as well, the statistics say, and of course, statistics are just numbers, and you can, nothing really lies as well as statistics, because you can manipulate them. That's one thing I learned in public health, taking statistics. You can manipulate them however you want to manipulate them. Let me see, what is the outcome that I want? Let me see, we'll just change these statistics around. We'll analyze them a little differently, and we'll present them in a little bit different way. So we can present whatever it is that we want to present. And statistics say 1 in 29 women from birth to death in their 84 years of life expectancy is expected to die of breast cancer. 1 in 29. Now, if you are 70 years of age, that's about 1 in 8. So think, oh my goodness, 1 in 8. If you are 80, it goes down to like 1 in 5, something like that. If you're 90, it's something like 1 in 4. How is it possible that, you get older? Well, because all these other ladies have already died off of something else. 1 in 2 will die of heart disease. How much hype do you hear about, hey, we need to do something about heart disease in women? You don't hear much of anything. You hear a lot of hype about heart disease in men, but you don't hear much about it in women. All you hear about is breast cancer. Why? Money. There's a lot of money in treating breast cancer and breast cancer research. Not a lot of money in cardiovascular disease for women. You know why? Most women, unlike men, don't survive the first heart attack. They're gone. I would say that should be a much more important than disease than breast cancer by far. Because not very many women die initially of breast cancer. But 1 in 2 women die initially of heart disease. So we really need to kind of look at our priorities as far as what we target, as far as real prevention is concerned. Real prevention. So disease abounds. What does health do? Well, we've got all kinds of things: cancer, heart disease, diabetes, Crohn's, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, stroke, schizophrenia, suicide, malaria, AIDS, H1N1, Ebola, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. So we can just scare the heck out of you so you'll part with your dollar. That's really what it's about. Because if we scare you enough, you'll part with your dollars. But the problem is you don't part with your dollars in the grocery store. You complain that, food's too expensive. It's amazing to me how many people complain about the price of ground beef as they've got a 12-pack of Diet Coke in their shopping cart. And then as well, they'll complain how much it costs to go to the doctor for their diabetes now that they're having to treat. So, what do we see on the farm then? Same thing. Diseases abound in the cattle, the sheep, the hogs, the poultry, the fish, the crops, etc. Same thing. They parallel. Exactly. They parallel exactly because it's the same principle. It's the same principle. So human health is just an indicator of what's messed up on the farm. So we look back at all of these diseases in humans, it's just an indicator of what's going on in the farm. And the only way we're going to correct these is by correcting these on the farm. Which means we got to put health back into the farm. It's really pretty simple. But the thing about it is you can't necessarily patent it. And it's not real glamorous. How many of you have heard of any yellow ribbon fundraising 5K races to put nutrition back on the farm? You don't hear, that's not a lot of pizzazz for that, is it? Gee, no, I don't think I'm really interested in that. But we've got to get back nutritional balance in the soil, because soil health determines plant health, and plant health determines the nutritional value of the food that we put in our mouth, and the nutritional value of the food determines the value of the type of diet that we are going to follow, and then, of course, the diet value determines the human health. But, of course, allopathic medicine wants to say, no, that's just a small part. It really doesn't make any difference. It's making sure that we correct all of your drug deficiencies. And if we correct all of your drug deficiencies, you'll be healthy.
Hi there, just wanted to interrupt this episode to make sure that you have heard about our Acres 2024 EcoAg Conference. This year's event will be held in Madison, Wisconsin from December 2nd through December 5th. I think we have put together one of the best lineups for a conference in the regenerative and organic agriculture space. Gabe Brown, Alan Williams, and their team from Understanding Ag, along with Joel Salatin, John Kemp, Gary Zimmer, Mark Shepard, Dr. Nasha Winters, Megan Neubauer, Matt Powers, Nigel Palmer, Will Harris, Jeff Poppin, Aaron Silva, Austin Unruh, Andre Liu, Jay Fuhrer, Steve Diver, and many more. So if you're interested, feel free to give us a call at 970-392-4464 or email us at support@acresusa.com. You can also register online at acresusa.com/eco-ag.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. That's like saying that God created the earth with an atrazine or a glyphosate deficiency. Yeah. Well, that's the same sense. Now, of course, Monsanto would like you to believe that. The universities would like you to believe that. Yeah, we have a glyphosate deficiency out here. That's why we have all these weeds growing. So, what you have to understand is that nature really likes balance. And if you look at a teeter-totter, what you'll find is that as nutrition goes up, disease goes down, and vice versa. They cannot exist optimally in the same place at the same time. So you cannot have optimum nutrition and a full-blown disease at the same time. It does not occur. It simply does not occur. So what we see abounding in both agriculture and the soil as well as in the home is a high rate of disease and an increasing level of disease. And people are going to tell me, oh, but we're living longer, doctor. Aren't you paying attention to the longevity statistics, doctor? People are living longer. Really? No, not really so much longer. The majority of our increase in longevity is all about public health, all about sanitation, particularly of water and sewage. Easy to prove. Just take a trip to Africa. Why is the life expectancy so short in Africa? Because of water and lack of sanitation. So, as well, if you look at the statistics on how long a 10-year-old lives, life expectancy today is versus a 10-year-old in 1900. Or let's look at the life expectancy of a 65-year-old today versus a 65-year-old in 1900. You'll find out it's not significantly different. It is a few years, 3 to 4 years, I think, something like that. That's about it. But what happens is they take the entire population to average in age and say this is what your life expectancy is. Wow, we've really increased it. Well, how many of you are aware that there were a number of our founding fathers in this country in the 1700s who lived into their upper 80s and lower 90s? Now, this was the 1700s. Oh, but we've increased our life expectancy so far today. No, the issue is if you look back in 1900, there was a very high rate of death expectancy of newborns in 1900. As well, we had a lot of mothers die of childbearing in 1900. We had a lot of children die between, if the birth was successful, a lot of these children didn't make it to age 10. So all of that goes into looking at life expectancy. Today, most of those children and mothers are going to live in this country. So our increase in life expectancy is not because we've done such a great job in medicine. It's because we've done a better job in sanitation. So the terrain really is all about what we have to look at, the terrain. Because we look at low-grade inflammation, and low-grade inflammation is, I said it's visceral fat, triggers low-grade inflammation. And low-grade inflammation, we know today, is a major issue relative to Alzheimer's. It is a major issue relative to type 2 diabetes. What do I mean major issue? It's a major trigger. It is the underlying cause. It is also the underlying cause for hypertension, for cancer, for stroke, for heart disease, for osteoporosis, for accelerated aging, for insulin resistance, for suppressed immune function, for rheumatoid arthritis, for sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is loss of muscle density. Low-grade inflammation is the trigger for all of these things. All of these things. So, the party line, however, wants to tell you, well, yes, that's true. They acknowledge that inflammation is there, but there's nothing you can do about it because, well, you've got the fat gene, the diabetic gene, the heart disease gene, the cancer gene, the Alzheimer's gene, the smoker gene, the drug abuser gene, the lazy gene, the gullible to all of this fiction gene. Now, the last I knew, the only genes I had were those that I wore. But nonetheless, you got a gene for everything. And why is that? Well, it's because then, you poor folks, you don't have to take responsibility for anything. Because it's all genetic. And by the way, we have technology that's going to solve that for you. All we need is just a little bit more money. So we'll be passing the hat here later. You just donate a little bit more money because we're going to solve it for you through genetic engineering research, stem cell research. We're going to do that for you. We just need a little bit more money. Well, I remember that Richard Nixon announced that in 1973. The war on cancer. All we need is just a little bit more money. Yep, and we'll solve that for you. So lifestyle can definitely trump genetics. It does. It absolutely trumps genetics. And really when we talk about that, a plan for health. So, we know how to get to disease. That's pretty easy to do. But how do we get to health? And of course it has to start on the farm. But in the home, what do we have to do? Well, most importantly, we have to look at a low glycemic food plan. And basically that is the Cenogenics Food Diamond. I'll put that up here in just a moment for you. Regular exercise, particularly anaerobic. And people say, I work every day. Yeah, that's good. How much exercise you? But I work every day, Doc. I'm a farmer. I work every day. We pitch manure. We do all that kind of stuff. That's great. I'm glad you do a lot of work. How much exercise do you do? They still don't get it. Exercise and work are not one and the same. Why do I say that? Well, work doesn't release a lot of endorphins. Exercise releases endorphins, feel-good hormones, healing hormones. So there's a big difference. Balance your hormones. So that doesn't mean you just take a hormone. That means we have to look at all of them. And we have to make sure they're in the optimum range. optimum range, not the normal range, because what is normal? Normal is an average of taking 1,000 people who are all pre-disease, and we say, oh, okay, you're within a normal range. Because what they do is, statistically, they just draw a bell curve, and they take 1 or 2 standard deviations from the mean, and now that's their normal range. But think about it for a moment. Wouldn't it be different if they took 1,000 truly healthy people versus 1,000 pre-disease people? Wouldn't you have a different range of normal? Absolutely you would. So what we want is optimum. What's optimum? We want health. So optimum is where we are assuming you should be in order to have health. It's different. It's a different place. Then we have to have appropriate supplementation. Why? Because the nutrition is not in the food. And until it's in the food, we have to supplement. Some of you in the farming operations, you've already noticed, as you improve the quality of the forage going in, the animals start eating less and less free choice mineral. Why? Because we're getting them more healthy. Because we are fulfilling the need in the food itself. But until we do, we need that supplementation. Regular and adequate sleep. Some people say, I don't like to sleep. I don't sleep very much. Well, a lot of people have sleep apnea. A lot of people snore heavily. A lot of people just don't get very good sleep. Well, their hormones are messed up. They're too stressed out. Whatever the reason might be. Maybe hubby snores too much. Maybe the wife snores too much. Who knows? But the bottom line is, those are part of the things we have to address. Because we can do all the other things, and if you don't sleep well, we can't do a lot to help you until we get you sleeping properly. So sleep is a very important restorative process. Low glycemic diet. Why is that so important? Because, I guess it does work, but it's pretty light. What we're looking at here, blood sugar is going to be the blue dots, and insulin level is going to be the red dots. And what you see if we have an optimal blood sugar insulin range is it stays fairly flat throughout the day. And when we put a low glycemic meal in there, we don't have a huge kick in the sugar level, blood sugar level. So therefore, we don't get a huge kick in the insulin level to try to drive that down. And particularly, what happens is we don't get a lot of food cravings because we're eating every 2 to 3 hours. And we're eating a low glycemic snack. I'm not saying we have to follow the Atkins diet. We're using a low glycemic diet. All right? But here's what happens if we have the standard American diet. What we do is we eat only 2 or 3 meals a day, maybe 4, and they're high glycemic foods. How do I know they're high glycemic foods? When you sit down at the table, most of you at home or in a restaurant, what's the first thing they bring to you? Bread. Bread's high glycemic, particularly most of the bread that you're going to find on most of the tables in this country. I realize there's a few of them here that do have whole grain breads. Most of the people in this country, it's going to be white bread. Or it's going to be that fake whole grain stuff. What do I mean, that fake whole grain stuff? The stuff you go to the grocery store and buy, it says whole grain bread, and when you read the ingredient list, the first and greatest ingredient is white bleached flour. And what they do is they put a little bit of whole grain in there, 2 or 3 ingredients down the list, so that they can say on the label, whole grain bread. But in reality, it's not. So what it does, it drives your blood sugar way up. Body doesn't like high blood sugar because it doesn't carry a lot of good oxygen. So the insulin level is going to shoot up as well. Insulin drives a lot of that sugar into the cell, and if it's more energy than you need, into fat. It's pro-inflammatory. And not only that, so then down goes your blood sugar. Boom. Now you're shaky, you're craving food, and what do you usually reach for first? More sugar. Why? Because that's the fastest way to replenish now a low blood sugar. So it becomes a huge, steep roller coaster. So what that does is it wipes out the adrenal glands. So now you have adrenal fatigue on top of, eventually, insulin resistance. And pretty soon, the cell doesn't recognize the insulin anymore because you've been crying wolf so often that the cell says, forget you, and now you have to go on insulin. call that diabetes. So that's what we get in a high glycemic meal. So look at that. There's a low glycemic meal frequently throughout the day, every 2 to 3 hours. So you never get famished. And there's a high glycemic meal. So you're always craving. You're putting on weight. Doctor, I just can't lose weight. Yeah, well, stop eating all this junk. All of this high carbohydrate foods. Oh, but gee, I like that. And I'll tell you what, ladies, you know this. The men are the worst culprits of this. And usually it's the men are the biggest problem. Because the men are the ones, particularly in many of the families, who dictate what the wife cooks. And so if she cooks something good, he turns up his nose at it and say, I don't want that. So he's the one that's the problem that we have to get off from the white flour junk. Because he likes that sticky, white, fluffy bread, and he likes all those pastries and all that kind of junk. Now, you can do those with good grains and whatever, but I'm telling you, the majority of families in this country don't do that. So we have to get away from those things. So here is some data on how many calories we consume today in the United States. And if we look at that back in 1970, so this is only 40 years old, 1970, just a little over 2,250 calories per person was the average consumption. And out here in 2000, we were up over 2,700 calories per day that we consume. Any wonder why we're too heavy? Not only that, the amount of refined grains have skyrocketed since the 70s all the way up here to 2000. Annual pounds per person now is about 200 pounds of refined white flour and sweetener. Here we go, the 70s all the way up to 2000. Look back here in the 50s, the amount of sweetener consumption, pounds per person. We're up here almost 150 pounds per person in 2000. In the 1950s, we were just over 105. Don't tell me this is genetics. Don't tell me this is God's will. That's baloney. This is all human choice. It's all human choice. And we've done that to ourselves. Here's the food diamond. The food diamond basically says the foremost important food that you're going to consume is water. Oh, but doctor, I don't like to drink water. That's okay. The most important thing that you're going to drink today is water. But doctor, I don't like water. That's okay. The most important thing you're going to drink today is water. Half your weight in ounces. You weigh 200 pounds, you drink 100 ounces of water. And so people say, I know you can come up with things. Oh, gee, should it be purified water? Should it be this water? Should it be distilled water? Should it be that water? Should it be energized water? I don't care. If you want to use it as an excuse not to drink water, you will. The bottom line is we have to drink more water because we have to be able to flush the system. Because the next thing that people usually tell me is, doctor, I don't like to go to the bathroom. You know, it's not convenient. You know, I get real busy and I just don't have time to go to the bathroom. Well, okay, do you have time to attend your own funeral? What about your own stay in the hospital? Do you have time to attend that? So, water is vitally important. That is first and foremost, water. Then, we need to make sure that the majority of the food intake are vegetables. Vegetables is the majority of our food intake. Has to be the majority. And that doesn't just mean overcooked green beans or sugared carrots. That means a whole variety, particularly fresh and raw, as well as maybe some cooked. That's fine, steamed, whatever. But all cooked vegetables don't count. Now, in some areas of the country, that's pretty difficult in the wintertime. I recognize that. So at least fresh canned vegetables are going to be better than no vegetables. I agree. That's very true. You have to do the best. Then lean protein, which includes fish, grass-fed lean beef, and so on and so forth. Of course, you know, most people like a lot of fat in there. That's great if it's truly grass-fed, not the grain-fed, sick cows. Then a little bit of fresh fruit, as well as healthy fats, which is up on the top, and you see that we're going to consume about the equivalent amount of healthy fats as we do grains. And I know the grain farmers don't like to hear that. Well, I didn't say no grains. But the thing about it is that we need to get more vegetables, more lean proteins, water, and fruits into the system. Vegetables is the biggest. But if you look at the standard American diet, you look at the standard food pyramid, what is the largest portion of the diet? Grains. Grains is the largest portion of that. Oh, gee, I have all this wonderful pasta and all this kind of stuff. Wonderful for what? Promoting inflammation, yes. I didn't say none, just not the major part of your diet. And it takes a while to change. I mean, I grew up as well. We had pancakes and French toast and those kinds of things. But we also had meat and protein for breakfast. So what did I have for breakfast this morning? Some of you saw what I had for breakfast this morning. I had steamed vegetables and a chicken breast. Yesterday, I had steamed vegetables and a salmon fillet for breakfast. Oh, but I don't like vegetables for breakfast, doctor. Oh, but I don't like to eat breakfast. Okay, that's your choice. There are things we can do. Well, we can put together a protein shake, a smoothie in the morning. Some people just don't like to eat a lot in the morning. Okay, we can alter that a little bit. I'm not saying you have to sit down and have the same thing that I have for breakfast. But if you want to be healthy, if you want to do something about your own body, then do something about your diet. As well, then, nutrition hooks in and determines how well we're going to be able to exercise and what the consequences of exercise are, and which also then links to hormones. Remember I said exercise, as opposed to work, triggers endorphins. Endorphins are very important they're the feel-good hormones as well as they are the healthy, healing hormones for us. So we need to look at how all of those hook together. So if all I do is say, oh, doctor, okay, you can take care of my hormones, doctor, but I'm going to eat the way I want to eat. Fine, don't waste my time. Because the hormones are not really going to help you that much. Because the hormones are dependent upon adequate exercise and nutrition in order for them to work properly. So we can put them in there, but if we don't do the necessary building blocks, the hormones don't work like they're supposed to work. Lifestyle is all about your food plan or eating program. Lifestyle is about your exercise program. You'll have plenty of time for your body to be sedentary when you're dead. And by the way, you're going to lose some weight too. You don't have to worry about losing weight there. So you'll lose weight there just fine. Lifestyle is about getting your hormones and your metabolism balanced. That's really what it's about. And I'm not saying that you have to go out and you have to run wind sprints. Yes, I am. No, I'm not saying that you have to do that. But the thing about it is, some of you obviously are never going to get to wind sprints. But the thing is, you need to get out and move in a sustained duration. 30 minutes 3 times a week. And some of you, that's just going to be a leisurely walk, and that's fine. Because that's something that's more than sitting on the couch. Others of you, you're going to graduate to, now you're going to do 30 minutes of a brisk walk 3 days a week. And then we're going to graduate you to 30 minutes of a little brisker walk 30 minutes 3 times a week. And some of you, we're going to graduate to doing interval training, depending upon how healthy you want to be, what your lean muscle mass you want to have, how healthy you want to be. How important is it for you to reverse your diabetes, to reverse your cardiovascular disease? How important is it for you to reverse it versus living with it? That really is the question. So I can't answer that only for myself. I cannot answer that for you. So it's about getting your hormones and your metabolism balanced. And exercise is one of the ways that we get that metabolism balanced. You have to plan for health. Everyone should live fully until they die. And for example, and I can't say that my grandfather was the ideal person in health. He wasn't very good. But the one thing did is he moved. That's my mother's father. At 89, he died. But 2 weeks before he died, he was playing golf at 89 years of age. How many people, and my grandmother lived, my father's mother lived to 96 and died quietly in her own home, lived alone, taking care of herself. How many people do we see today that they spend the last 5 to 10 years of their life completely oblivious, drooling, wearing a diaper, and we call that living? We can prevent that process from occurring. That's not genetic. We can prevent that. But you have to do what it takes to prevent that. Now, all of you are in some kind of business. A farming business, maybe a produce business, maybe a company business where you're selling products of some type, fertilizers, foods, equipment, whatever it might be. You're in some kind of business. For you to be successful versus somebody in that same business who is not successful, what's the difference? If you're successful, that means you are doing and have done whatever is necessary to be successful. Isn't that correct? Versus the person that failed at the same thing you're succeeding at, just wasn't willing to do what you were willing to do to be successful. That's all it means. That's all it means. And so, relative to reversing disease, all it means is that we have the choice to do whatever it takes to reverse that disease. It's our choice. We have that choice. Sometimes it can be a little more complicated. It can be confusing. But the bottom line is, we're still responsible for what we seek out. Lifestyle determines which path you're going to be on, whether it's health or death. The better the lifestyle, the better the health and the well-being we will experience, even reversal of disease, and the less environmental stressors that are going to adversely affect us. Because we have all kinds of stressors in our life all the time. So it's important for us to understand we are in charge. We have the capacity to change our own health. And part of that, yes, is we may seek out individuals that can help us with that. But the bottom line is, I as a physician, I can't exercise for you. I can only exercise for myself. I can't eat for you. I can only eat for myself. I can't do it for you. I can maybe lead you in certain directions. I can make recommendations that you need to do this or that. But you have to do it for yourself. I have to do it for myself. The bottom line is as well, all of our health relative to the nutrition, and we saw this right here. Whoop. You notice that the largest cog wheel in this system is nutrition. The largest. That's the farm. Our health of our society is absolutely reflecting the health or lack of health on the farm, in the soil, in the field, in the crops. So if we really want to change this aspect, we have to change what's going on in the farm. But as consumers, all of us in this room are consumers. As consumers, we make choices every day about what we purchase, what we spend our dollars on. That is the most important vote we will ever cast, and we cast it every single day. That's where change is coming. The whole point that all of you are here. You are voting. By coming here, most people had to pay for it in some way, whether it's gas or admission fee or whatever, but you paid for it. You voted with your dollar of what you wanted. That's why it's here. We have the power to make these changes and to do these things. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you.
Thank you for listening to the Acres USA podcast, a podcast production of Acres USA. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and other popular podcast platforms. Acres USA is North America's oldest publisher on production-scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. Find our books and other Acres USA media and learn about Acres USA events at acresusa.com. Read our online magazine at members.acresusa.com, and we'd like to thank Acres USA staff for their contributions to producing this podcast. This episode was edited and engineered by Kennedy Stroessel and Weston Larson of Acres USA. And we're grateful to our guests for taking the time to talk with us about their experiences.